coup against the forces of President Mahmoud Abbas. They've used Gaza as a launching pad for rockets against Israeli cities and have contributed deeply to a very bad daily life for the Palestinian people in Gaza and to a humanitarian situation that we have all been trying to address. Well, Hamas has made it very difficult, said McCormick, the State Department spokesman, has made it very difficult for the people of Gaza to have a reasonable life. His statement also went on to say the U.S. is deeply concerned about the protection of innocents and expressed its concerns to the Israeli government. All right, that's what's coming out here. People are, at this hour, very concerned about the people in Gaza. There were leaflets dropped on them earlier that told them to evacuate. But when we talk to the people that are inside the Gaza Strip tonight, they say, where could we go? Many of them are very limited, and they report that they are without communications and they are without electricity at this point. Let's find out more about Israel's standpoint now as this operation has gotten underway. Chief International Correspondent Christiane Amanpour is there in Israel. She talked with the government spokesman, Mark Regev. Let's give it a listen.
If you're asking what the goal of the operation is, it's simple. We want to create a situation where the civilian population in southern Israel is no longer on the receiving end of those deadly Hamas rockets. When quiet can be achieved, this operation can finish.
How can quiet be achieved? Let's just go back to 2006 with Israel's war against Hezbollah, which has many similarities to this one. Israel went after waves of airstrikes, went in on the ground. Those rockets almost didn't stop. Hezbollah fought Israel to a draw. What do you really think you can achieve here in Gaza?
I think we've learned some important lessons since 2006. I think those lessons you can already see in the way the Israeli military has acted in the last week. And we are confident we can achieve a situation where the Hamas leadership understands clearly that it's simply not in their interest for them to continue shooting rockets at Israeli civilians.
Okay, so is the point, as Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni said today, to get them to stop shooting those rockets? Is the point to pound them so hard and then stop with the warning that if they start again, you'll pound them? What precisely is the point when you probably know that you're not going to wipe them out?
We haven't articulated regime change as a policy goal of this operation. Our goal is purely defensive, to protect our people, to protect those 500,000 Israelis in the south of my country who've been living on the receiving end of these deadly rockets. When that is achieved, the operation will be over. If it can be achieved tomorrow, the operation will be over tomorrow.
Are there any realistic diplomatic moves for either a ceasefire or some kind of internationally backed resolution to this, a monitoring, for instance, on the borders of Gaza?
There are all sorts of talks going on. But I have to say what is clear. We don't need a Band-Aid solution here. We don't need to go back to where we were a week ago. We won't agree to that. We have to have a solution that is sustainable, that is durable. We don't want again to see all those Israelis living in the south fearing day to day the terror of an incoming Hamas rocket. That is an unacceptable reality, and we refuse to return to that.
But again, clearly this is going to be a political resolution in the end. It's not going to be one militarily, as you saw in, with the Hezbollah war, and as you've just said, you don't want regime change in Gaza. So how are you going to come to an accommodation, a realistic accommodation, that what you're doing now actually is more than just a Band-Aid?
I think Hamas is understanding today that shooting rockets at Israeli civilian targets is simply unacceptable. They are paying an extremely high price for that. And I think they'll understand that it's better to keep quiet in the south. They've alienated not only large parts of the international community, not only large parts of the Arab world, they've alienated their own Palestinian street. No one understands why Hamas threw out 2 weeks ago, publicly, they tore up the understandings reached with Egypt, they tore up the ceasefire arrangements, threw them out the window. Then they started barrages against Israeli civilian targets, which reached a crescendo on Christmas Day. 80 rockets, missiles, rocket shells, mortar shells hitting Israeli civilians. It's just unacceptable. If Hamas today is in a difficult situation, frankly, they have no one else but themselves to blame.
Mr. Regev, you say that they've lost the street. Well, the fact of the matter is, as you've seen, is that there have been wave after wave of protest in Islamic countries all over the world, right here in the Palestinian territories, in Western Europe as well, in the United States as well. How are you going to win this battle when you know very well that the vision that is being given to the world is dead Palestinian children and women.
Here I'd have to remind you that since Hamas took over the Gaza Strip almost 2 years ago, they have systematically destroyed independent civil society. They have systematically destroyed independent NGOs. They are reporting all this atrocity propaganda. There's no way whatsoever to independently verify the sort of numbers coming out of Gaza. They have an interest. If you listen to Hamas, it's like every single person Israel has hit, it's an innocent civilian, and we've hit no military targets at all. It's simply...
Well, there's 2 points to that, Mr. Regev. There's 2 points to that. One, the United Nations has talked about these figures, and they are in there. They've also said that at the very least, 25% of the more than 400 people who've been killed there are civilians. And the other point is that, yes, we would like to verify it, but Israel is not allowing the international press to go into Gaza. This is an unprecedented situation.
First of all, I'm hopeful that the international press will be into Gaza as soon as possible. We're hopeful that could happen tomorrow. I hope with the fighting, it's still possible. But let's be clear here, the people of Gaza, the civilian population of Gaza, is not our enemy. On the contrary, in many ways, they're victims like us. Both the civilian population of southern Israel and the civilian population of the Gaza Strip have been victims of this terrible extremist Hamas regime.
The thing is, though, that they're there. They were elected by their people in elections in 2006, practically 3 years ago right now. Is there a political solution to this?
There's a political solution if Hamas reforms. If Hamas accepts not what Israel demands, but what were ultimately the United Nations benchmarks. If they cease this sort of violence, if they recognize my country's right to exist. Until now, Hamas has failed to meet the most minimal benchmarks established by the international community. It's not just Israel that refuses to talk to Hamas. It's Canada, it's Europe, it's the United States, it's Japan, it's Australia. Most of the international community refuses to talk to Hamas, and for good reason.
There are others, though, who do believe that Hamas is there. It is control of a huge slice of the Palestinian territories with 1.5 million people, and that perhaps at some point they do need to be engaged. Right now, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair is in the air on the way here in his capacity as representative of the Quartet. French President Nicolas Sarkozy is due here and in the region on Monday. What is it that they can do and say that can bring an end to this war right now?
We'll be talking...
with a satisfactory ceasefire.
The ceasefire that is satisfactory is one that is a real ceasefire, not a band-aid. So we can be sure that the civilian population in southern Israel no longer has to be on the incoming end of these Hamas rockets. It's a very easy point. If that can be achieved, then there's peace tomorrow.
All right, that's Israel's